Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Tian. In the previous episode, I mentioned 8 Trigrams, Bagua, is from Wuji. In this episode, I will explain how 8 Trigrams is evolved from Wuji all the way to the Gua, to the Trigrams. In the previous episodes, I mentioned 8 Trigrams, its starting point is Wuji. Then we get Taiji, 2 forms, 4 images, and we get 8 trigrams, Bagua. So the information I present today is from Grandmaster Hu Yanchai. He is the founder of Weixin Shengjiao in Taiwan. Wuji, what is Wuji? Wuji is Tao. So you can think Wuji is something. It covers everything. There's nothing larger than Wuji. There's nothing smaller than Wuji. Wu means no. Ji means limited. So there's no limited. There's boundless. You can think this way. So it's impossible for our human mind to think about this. So we just use this concept, Wuji, to represent the star. In Wuji, there's nothing called good or bad, good or evil. No, nothing. Everything is all together. Then we have Taiji. Remember in first episode, we mentioned the pre-heaven chi. This is pre-heaven chi. So this is the starting of our thought. We have a thought. At that point, that is the chi. There's nothing good or bad, but we have something there. So we call it Taiji. After our first thought arises, we start to have the second thought, right? We have an idea, then we think, is this correct? Is this right? Is this doable? Something like that. So at this point, we call it 2 forms. After Taiji, our first thought arises. We have a separate thinking. In this point, the yang, you can think, is something like positive. So we call it old yang, lao yang. And the dark side is the yin, means negative, is lao yin, old yin. Things keep evolving. So after we have our second thought, right, we add up. So when we add one more old yan on the top of the yan, right, we add one lao yang above the lao yang. So we have 2 yan. That is greater. So we call it Taiyang, greater yang. Then at the base of yang, we have a little bit doubt, something like that. Or you can think like this. This is a family full of boys, men, right? Then a woman marry into the family. So only one woman marry into this big family full of men, right? So in this point, we call it less yin because the majority is yang. And the next one, that is greater yin. You see, on the left hand side, we have old yin. On the base of old yin, on the base of lao yin, we add one more old yin. We have 2 lao yin, we have 2 old yin. So that is greater yin. Then on the base of O yin, right, we have 1 O yang join. So just on the opposite side of the xiao yin, less yin, right? So the majority is yin and we have 1 yang join us. So this is why we call it less yang. This part is called 4 images. At this point, you already notice why Taiji look like this. Because in the previous part, right, here, this is greater yan. And for the greater yan, right, we have a little bit in. There are tons of brightness. We have a little bit darkness inside. So it shows here at this dot, right? The brightness has a little bit darkness. And how about the yin? Yin is this part, right? Yin is the dark part. And in this darkness area, we have a little bit brightness. You can think it's like at the moment of darkness, we have a little hope. A very teeny tiny hope shows up. On the base of 4 images, finally, we arrive to 8 trigrams. So the first one, you see, the greater N has 2 parts. The less Yin has 2 parts. Lesser Yang has 2 parts. And the greater Yin has 2 parts. And we will add one more O Yang. One more O Yang, right? Into the greater Yin. That is the heaven. And we add one more Yin, right? One more old Yin into the Yang. That is the lake. So the next part is lesser Yin. At the base of lesser Yin, we add one O Yang, right? That is the fire. On the base of lesser Yin, we add one old Yin. That is the thunder. So you need to keep this in mind. 1 represent heaven. 2 represent lake. 3 represent fire. 4 represent thunder. We will use this number in the future. Okay, let's continue. Here we have greater Yin, right? On the base of greater Yin, we add one more old Yin. Here is the earth. On the base of greater Yin, we add one O Yang. That is the mountain. On the base of lesser Yang, we add one more O Yin. Dao Yin, that is the water. On the base of lesser Yang, we add one more O Yin. That is the wind. So number 5 is wind. Number 6 is water. Number 7 is mountain. Number 8 is earth. So this is how 8 trigrams evolved from Wuji. I will explain in detail one by one in the future.